Hello again, NBA fans, and thanks for tuning in to another installment of NBA Back in the Day. Our show rewinds the clock on the current day NBA and revisits the players, games, and storylines of yesteryear's National and American Basketball Associations. So let us now tip it off with our all-star front court of award-winning documentary filmmaker Lindell Singleton and former Executive Vice President and General Manager of the New Orleans Jazz, Barry Mendelson.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to another installment of NBA Back in the Day. As always, I'm joined by my fellow basketball enthusiast, my friend, and NBA devotee, the legendary Barry Mendelson. Barry, what's up, man? How you doing today?
Liddell, good to be with you.
Man, I'm so glad that we're here today on NBA Back in the Day. And I want, from the very first time that you and I started hanging out, I was blown away by your connection to the Los Angeles Lakers. And because, I'm an LA guy, grew up on the Lakers, Chick Hearn and all that, I love the Lakers as well. And just talk to us about how this little Jewish kid from upstate New York ended up in Hollywood working for the Los Angeles Lakers, man. Tell us that story first and foremost.
Well, I'm a lucky guy. And I think it's important for context. I grew up in Rochester, New York, which had an NBA team.
The Royals.
Rochester Royals. Right. And for a quarter, I used to go to the games.
25 cents.
25 cents.
What?
My mom would drop me off, and we played in the Edgerton Park Arena, and she'd give me $1, and I'd have $1, so it's 25 cents to get in, but I had enough for a hot dog and a soda.
Man.
And the Rochester Royals won the NBA championship in 1950, and I was small then, a lad, and I developed this great love affair of basketball. And I can name the starting five. I can name everybody, not everybody on the team, and they won the then NBA championship. And so I always had the NBA in my heart.
So, okay, now I don't want to go too divergent, but Rochester became Cincinnati, which became Kansas City, Omaha, which became Sacramento?
Very good. You are really good. There's only one other guy that knows that besides me.
Man, okay.
That's correct.
And what year did they actually leave Rochester? I don't want to. I'm just fascinated. But that Rochester had a team.
Rochester had a team because they were the original member team. Before the NBA became the NBA, there was another league.
Right.
And it was Fort Wayne, Syracuse, Rochester. They were a member team of the original NBA, but there was a small market. So at some point, the city couldn't support the team, and they moved to Cincinnati. And that's when you had your draft picks by geography.
Ooh.
So Cincinnati
got
Jack Twyman, who was an
Ohio State.
No, University of Cincinnati. He was an All-American and won the NCAA championships. So you always got a territorial pick, and if you chose to pass on it, it would release that territorial pick. But they didn't pass on Jack Twyman, and he was a great player. And so that was my emergence with the NBA. So when I got lucky and got a job with the Boston Celtics to start my career, I was in love. I was in heaven. I was a 26-year-old kid out of the Army working for the Boston Celtics.
Wow. And so the transition then from Boston to Los Angeles, tell us how that happened, how you got this gig working for Jack Kent Cooke, man.
Well, I got a phone call from a guy in the sports business who said, "Do you know anything about the Lakers?" And I said, you mean Elgin Baylor and Jerry West and Wilt? He said, yeah. He said, well, they're looking for a director of marketing and advertising, and I gave the owner your name, so call him. And 5 days later, I had a job.
Wow.
I was on a plane to Los Angeles. I paid my own way, by the way.
Of course.
And I was on a plane to Los Angeles, and I had one interview with Jack Kent Cooke, and he told me how little he was going to pay me. He told me when he wanted me to start, and I said okay to everything.
Man, Jack Kent Cooke.
Yep.
Canadian, right?
Canadian, Toronto, naturalized American citizen by act of Congress. Smartest, a true sportsman, smartest man I ever met in the business of sport, taught me a lot. And I got a job the year they won the world championship.
Wow. Now, Jack Kent Cooke he bought the Lakers from who?
Robert Short from Minneapolis.
Bob Short, who used to own the Washington Senators, right?
Correct, and the Minneapolis Lakers.
That's right.
So they kept the name Lakers when they moved them to Los Angeles, and Jack put him in the sports arena.
Right. And actually, this is some obscure thing that only, you and I, because we're old, but we still love basketball, is that first year the Lakers were there, they actually played in the Shrine Auditorium.
I didn't know that.
And I don't even know if the Shrine Auditorium is even still there,
Yeah,
but it was
does.
down on Figueroa and Jefferson.
Yeah, it does exist. Absolutely.
You get the call, and 5 days later, you're on probably some American Airlines DC-10 going out to LAX, and you end up there, and you're working for Jack Kent Cooke and working for the Los Angeles Lakers.
That's right. The year they won the world championship.
Man, like when you first got there, like were you just like completely just immersed, like blown away? Like how did I end up here in Los Angeles? So what were you really like feeling when you first got there and got that opportunity to work for the Lakers?
Lindell, I can't tell you how I was just so awe-inspired. It was surreal to me that I could be involved in the NBA with one of the premier franchises that over the 60s, they were always the runner-up, but never could get the ring, but they were always there.
Right.
And they had two players that I absolutely was crazy about.
Right.
In Elgin and Jerry West. And their names were so in the papers every day and on radio. And here I was sitting in this little office in the fabulous Forum that Jack built.
Right.
And every day I'd see Elgin walk by me and see Jerry walk by me and see Wilt walk by me. I'm a 27-year-old kid.
Man, that's got to be some like surreal experience. Like from a guy from a kid really who grew up like loving basketball and embracing the NBA, that you find yourself like in Los Angeles and Elgin Baylor and Jerry West are just kind of stopping by the office and sitting down saying, "Hey Barry, what's up? What's it like being here?" That's got to be insane, man.
Remember, there were no cell phones then.
Oh, that's right. No mobile phones.
So
okay.
they would walk into my office. They would walk into my office and use my phone.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So because they always practiced when they were home. They practiced and had their shoot-arounds at the Forum. And after the shoot-around, they'd come upstairs, and Jerry would walk into my office, which was, very small, and he'd use my phone to make some calls. And he'd leave, and here's Riley coming into my office to use my phone. And then he'd leave, and here's Gail Goodrich coming into my office to use my phone. And I don't know what to think. I can't even relate to you that I was in an alternate universe. I must be in an alternate universe to have what I grew up with, watching basketball personally from the time I was 7 years old, going to a game. By myself, going to a game in Rochester, New York, to now I'm 27, 26, having Gail Goodrich and Jerry West and Pat Riley walk into my office to use my phone and say hello and sit down and chat with me. Of course, I'm trying to get some work done, sort of. And it was just stunning.
Wow.
And but it was the beginning of really learning the game of basketball.
What would you say as you reflect, as you go back and take that walk down memory lane, man, and you're thinking about that season? And the thing, Barry, that like whenever we talk about this, man, is that season was as magical for you as it was for the Lakers, because as a kid growing up in Los Angeles, living in South Central LA off Figueroa, listening to Chick Hearn on my 9-volt transistor radio, I lived the heartbreak of the Lakers getting beat by the Celtics 5 times in the decade of the 1960s. And of course, the most crushing one was the one that occurred in obviously 68-69, where they lost on the Don Nelson shot. But so for the Lakers in 1971-72, that was a magical time for them because they had been bridesmaids so often and they had been so close. But there's this juxtaposition, Barry, where it's a magical season for the Lakers and a magical season for you as a kid.
Well, they say LA is a Dodger town. And it's Dodgers first, USC second. In 1971, it was the Lakers first and everybody else second.
That's right.
And so every day it was more and more and more. I would sit in my office and stars would call me on the phone. To this day, I remember Jerry Lewis calling me.
Like Jerry Lewis, telethon Jerry Lewis guy?
The comedian.
Yeah, I know the comedian.
And Jerry Lewis would call me and try to hustle tickets because he couldn't get into a game.
Wow.
And he was calling me for tickets to a game. And there were times Mr. Cook would get a call from Jack Nicholson, whose season tickets were upstairs in the 3rd level then, if you remember.
Wow.
And he would pass the call off to me. And Jack Nicholson was trying to convince me to get him downstairs on the floor. So I was thrust into all of this, and I just went with it. You just go with it. You're inside of it. And I was just, the moments, but the things you learn by being around basketball players, how committed they are to winning every game. Every game. Jerry and Gail were so focused on winning every game they played. They played through injury. They played every night. They were competitive as hell. And it was stunning to see them prepare for a game on an 82-game schedule and then another 20-plus games in the playoffs, how ready they were every night. And there was a moment that they knew they had this season. It was their season. You could see it. You could feel it.
So we're going to do an episode later in the season where we just really get into that 71-72 season, but I want us to dwell to linger on that some today, because that was your inaugural season with the Lakers as well. You just mentioned that there was a moment when being around them, you felt that they knew that this was different.
Yeah.
Was it during the 33-game winning streak when they knew it was different, or was it subsequent to that, as you recall?
No, it was during the winning streak. There was a point where they knew, and I could feel it, that they really felt they could win every game the rest of the season. And there was this determination to not lose. Remember, Elgin was gone.
Yeah, because he retired after the
third or fourth game.
Third or fourth game
he
that
was
year.
Gone.
That's right.
And so it was that starting 5, and they were divergence of personalities. And Wilt had told Jack Kent Cooke before the season, this is our year. Wilt said that. He never said in his life that I'm aware of.
Right.
But he made a personal commitment to bring the champion, because Wilt was always kind of thought about as never winning the big one, right?
Right, of course.
He did win in Philadelphia in the late 60s.
Right.
But he never won with the Lakers until that year, and that was it. But he was fully invested in that year, and he was spectacular.
You know, and I remember, going back to thinking through that season, and what I remember is that Wilt made this just an insane commitment to defending that year. And not saying that Wilt wasn't a great defender before, but do like the nitty-gritty things on defense that are necessary to win a title.
By forcing every other team's guard down the lane. They wanted to force him down the lane.
Right.
So Jerry and Gale would play outside in, and so they would turn those guards and force them down, and you couldn't get by Wilt. You just couldn't. Wilt stop you every single time. And you're right, his commitment was on the defensive end. And so Wilt made that, it was Wilt's year, defensive end, and they had the perfect, I always say they had the perfect team because they had a small forward who could really shoot from the corner, Jimmy McMillan from Columbia.
Right.
May he rest in peace. They had Happy Hairston from NYU, who was a power player, forward.
Right.
And then it was Gale and Jerry in the backcourt. And so they were a perfectly matched position team. And they had guys that could come off the bench and light it up.
You know, one of the things I remember about that year, and you brought up, Harold Happy Hairston from NYU, is what a great rebounder that Hairston was.
Yeah.
An offensive rebounder.
The thing about Happy Hairston, I want to go back to, was he was a position rebounder.
Right.
He was always in the right position on the offensive glass. Mm-hmm. And he was just great at it.
Wow. And you have these two guards that, were like, when over the last several years, with Oakland, you had Klay Thompson and Stephen Curry. But really, the original Splash Brothers, you could argue, were Jerry West and Gail Goodrich, because both of them averaged over 25 points a game.
Absolutely.
In that
without
particular
a three,
year.
without a three,
25 points a game without a 3-point shot.
That's correct.
Wow, and Goodrich, if I remember, was actually the leading scorer on the Lakers team that year.
That gets lost in a lot of remembrances.
Yeah.
But he was the leading scorer, and he was great in the playoffs, and so it was a perfect year.
Right.
It was a perfect year.
Hello again, NBA fans, and thanks for tuning in to another installment of NBA Back in the Day.